Good morning, everybody. This is Greg Arzt from the PunchAlert, and we have Kim Conroy from the YMCA of Charlotte. Thank you all very much for taking the time to join our webinar this morning. We are going to talk about the PunchAlert platform and how the YMCA manages emergencies with PunchAlert. So this is a real treat for me. This is a different kind of webinar than we've done in the past because we have Kim here today. And so rather than listening to me talk about our platform, we're going to really spend some time talking about how it's used in action by someone that has to manage real incidents on a regular basis. So just a few formalities to get out of the way and just talk about an agenda. So we are recording this webinar, so for those of you that want it afterwards, please feel free to let us know and we'll send you a copy, and we'll be sending it to those people that registered and but couldn't make it this morning. We also have an ability so you can raise your hand throughout and post questions. We encourage you to do that as much as possible. So if I'm talking about a feature or Kim's telling a story and you have a question, please do that. Or you can raise your hand if you'd like us to try and address it during the session. And so we'll be monitoring that. All questions, though, will be answered towards the end of the session. So as an agenda, I'm going to give a brief intro to Kim. She's going to talk a little bit about the why. I'm going to then spend hopefully about 15 minutes, no more or about that, giving an overview of the PunchAlert platform, because there's some of you that have registered that probably haven't seen it before, don't know much about the product. A demo, a quick demo, and then we're going to get into the Q&A with Kim. So I have some questions for Kim that may direct us back towards a demo of the product, and again, we want to see your questions, so we're going to make sure to leave at least 15 minutes, that's what we're aiming for, at the end of the webinar to address any questions that you all submit throughout. So please chime in with your questions. All right, so getting started, I'd like to introduce Kim Conroy. So again, Kim is the Association Risk Manager for the YMCA of Greater Charlotte, which is one of the 10 largest YMCA associations in the country. She's also worked in similar capacities at the American Red Cross and Walt Disney World, and she's been such a great partner and friend to us at PunchAlert. So just wanted to start off with Kim, if you don't mind, just tell us all a little bit more about the YMCA of Charlotte and the main reason you decided to pursue and move forward with a product like PunchAlert.
Wonderful. Thank you, Greg. So a little bit more about the YMCA. We have 23 locations, and 19 of those locations are full facility branches where we have a variety of different programs that meet the needs of the community. So even though each of our branches may not have all of the same components, they are full, large facility branches. And then we also have 2 off-site, out of the county, by off-site I mean out of the county resident camps. We have 270,000 members at the Y in Charlotte. We have 5,000 volunteers and about 4,000 to 5,500 employees throughout the year. So 4,000 during our regular season, which would run September through May, and then during the summer, that's our peak season, where we have about 1,500 day camp counselors and additional lifeguards that we bring on board. So it's a different setup than a lot of people because we have so many part-time staff and then so many members that we serve. So there are just so many people who only interact with our Ys during a short period of time that we knew we needed a product that could be utilized in a number of different capacities. So we identified the need for a product like PunchAlert after we had the opportunity to partner with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security in 2014. During that time, we completed a survey that was a really in-depth look at security and our ability to respond during an emergency, and then how we would come back if there was a major emergency. And out of that survey, it identified the critical need for a communication system. We needed a communication system that was fast, but also very discreet, so that our staff could notify other staff or police or local authorities if there were an emergency and the need for assistance. Additionally, so even though we had this great document that showed us that. We also just received feedback from our staff that the ability to communicate during an emergency was one of their top concerns. So through that, we started investigating what products were out there that might meet the need. And then PunchAlert came to the top of the list, and after attending a webinar sort of similar to this one and learning about all of the features, we decided to pilot PunchAlert, and loved the way we were able to tailor it to our needs and decided to jump on board.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Kim, for the background on that. So we are going to get back to Kim very quickly with many more questions. And again, if you have questions for Kim, please start jotting them down and we will address them. All right, so for a quick overview on PunchAlert, for those of you that aren't familiar with the platform. So PunchAlert, what we offer is this community of safety. That's what we call it. Now, what does that really mean? Well, functionally, what you're getting is a safety communication platform that we like to think of as managing the full life cycle of an incident, in particular an emergency, but it may not be an emergency. You'll see how it kind of works. But it starts from this panic button, which most people use from the mobile app. You know, the mobile app is obviously very core to the platform. We all have it, so we leverage that. But it starts with this panic button. You need to know about incidents as quickly as possible, then empowering your organization, your responder team, to communicate in a two-way fashion to manage these incidents. I think you'll hear Kim talk a lot about that. I think they've been really effective at it. And then that team, they can make the decisions about, do we need to mass notify? Do we need to send out announcements? Do we need to release the emergency to a certain group of people? And then it becomes interactive in kind of a large-scale capacity, which we'll talk about. But all the way through resolution. So from reporting to resolution in one platform, the ability to kind of oversee and analyze it after the fact. So why do we build this? You know, we really are just trying to help organizations like the Y reduce their response time in any way possible. And communication tends to be a challenge pretty much anywhere. There's lots of phone calls out there. There's lots of great point solutions out there, like intercom systems and two-way radios and physical panic buttons, and those are all great. What we're trying to do, though, is kind of take out some of the time lost transferring information back and forth from all these different systems that people might use and try and make it all faster. So when we created this mobile platform, we had to think about the end user, because the Y, you know, Kim mentioned part-time employees, you know, and most organizations are asking their people to download an app on their personal device. And that's a little bit different than the past, where maybe they get a text message or an automated phone call, and that's fairly passive, not much of an opt-in. When you're asking people to download an app, there's much more of an opt-in. You want to make sure they see what's in it for them. They're not being tracked. This is good for them. You know, it's not going to cost them anything. They're going to be able to be part of your community, but also they can be part of maybe a broader community when they're not at work. So that's really what we're working towards. It's not, you'll see a lot of great functionality, but you don't get to leverage any of that functionality unless people download the app, which is not such a simple thing anymore. So we talk about community. You know, the Y is at the center of their community everywhere in the country, and you know, being here in Charlotte, we know there's such a huge part of the community here in Charlotte. So we wanted to really create an experience that they could use first with their employees, but then over time to expand that out to their community and really have it be an extension of the community they've already created. So how do you build a community of safety with PunchAlert? I'll just do a couple high-level things. First, you define your campus. So you geofence. You draw lines around your campus, which could be very small. It could be one building. It could be a massive area. It could be, really your protected areas are up to you. But these geofences are pretty important because they route emergencies properly based on where you are, and they also protect your employees' privacy by allowing you to alert people of an emergency without tracking them if they're not at work that day. So the geofencing is important. Next is setting up your internal responder team. And Kim, I think, will tell you about this. And you can call that responder team whatever you like. But that team is really critical. They're the ones that are going to be receiving every alert. So if you go forward with PunchAlert, it's not as if every emergency is going out to every employee. Your responder team, they're the ones that are going to receive it. And you can set up a different responder team for each location, which is what the YMCA has done. So that team is really critical, and they do need to be practiced. and very fluent in the product. And then all the configurations. So, Kim mentioned flexibility, meeting the needs of their unique organization. We're really trying not to change so much your process, but really allow our product to fit to it. So you can configure many of your, your teams, your locations, your categories. What are the types of emergencies you want to use it for? And then upload your emergency plans for those categories, so that those emergency plans go out to the right people at the right time. So I remember Kim, when we first got started with you, you had great emergency plans, but I do recall you mentioning a concern that the people may not have access to them when they needed them, or as easily as they could. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. The plan's no good if it's sitting on a shelf.
Right.
So that access was key for us.
Yep, cool. So that's one thing we're trying to do. Again, just make that information a little bit more accessible. And so once you go through the administrative and responder steps, there's the onboarding. And the onboarding, and we'll talk a lot about that with Kim. But the administrators and responders is really that critical step, and that's where we provide training. Once you get past that, the onboarding of your employees and your community can go pretty quickly, because there's really not a lot for them to know. It's pretty simple as far as that goes. But that's kind of that next step after you get past the administrative and responder training. And so at the end of the day, what you're getting is, these kind of 6 key features, and there's a lot of sub features, but panic button, responder management, so being able to manage an emergency right on your smartphone and communicate. So those, they don't necessarily have to have the radios handy; they can communicate on their phones. The real-time location will demonstrate that. The rich media, the photos, the video that you may need to crowdsource from people if you're looking for someone, you want to know what they look like. So that full emergency chain. And we also have these 2 other modules, which we're not going to focus a lot on today, but if there's some questions on it, we're happy to dive in, which are the tips module, which are for allowing people to report incidents that are non-emergencies and how you can handle that. And then the announcement module, which is more of your traditional mass notification system for your day-to-day announcements that are not exactly emergencies. And Kim can tell you a little bit about that as well, because the Y has kind of transitioned into using that feature more this year. Okay, so unless there's any questions we need to address right now, we'll launch into a quick demo. I'll do a quick time check. I think we're all right. All right, so give me a minute to put my phone on the screen. All right, hopefully everyone can see my phone. So we are going to do a high-level demo. Now, you'll notice I'm inside of a Geofence. This is something that was drawn in our admin console by us, by the customer, not by Punch, but by you. And you can create as many or as few of them as you need. And there could be, many Geofences per organization, even per branch. And that's what's controlling the default. So I'm reporting to Punch Technologies, and you see my logo there because I'm inside of our campus. And so if I go ahead and hit the red button, you can see the countdown. I'm going to go ahead and skip the countdown because I don't need to wait for it. And I'm going to declare it as a fire. Now notice I have reported this emergency, and an emergency plan has already been distributed. So now I know, okay, this is what I need to do in a fire. And also you can see on the map, well, let's see, where is this emergency? Well, the red flag is where it was reported. If it was very far away, you may need to get directions to it. Maybe you want to switch over to satellite mode to get a better view. And maybe you want to get a better view of where I am. If you view my profile, you can see what role I am, what time I checked in, the name of the region I'm in, which is simply the name of the Geofence, and these indoor location fields. These are optional. They're basically, if you have a concern about indoor location during an emergency, it's a great option to have. So right now, it's a little unrealistic. I'm very close to 3 demo beacons, as you can see. And as I move around a little bit, you'll see that changes. But imagine those beacons were named Greg's office or room 203, or the cafeteria, or what have you. So you place these beacons on the walls or ceilings, and they provide this indoor location field, which may be helpful when you're indoors, because that's when GPS tends to be less accurate. Because as you can see, GPS is approximating where I am, but it may, because I'm indoors, it may have me slightly in the parking lot versus indoors. So if you just need to know, is Greg on campus, GPS is great. If you need to know, okay, we're doing an evacuation, are we 100% positive he's no longer in the building? Then that's a nice feature to think about. So, and again, notice the geofence there. We're only tracking your folks if they check in during an emergency and they're inside one of your protected areas. So will your folks get it if they're not on property? Absolutely, if you release it to them. But you're not going to know where they are unless they're actually inside your property. Okay. So the main things I just wanted to show at the bottom, is the communication channel. So I have access to this emergency. I can say, need help in lobby, XYZ is happening. So maybe I do a text, maybe I do an audio recording. There's something going on in the lobby, if you can send some help. Or maybe we even submit a photo. You could say, this is what's going on, this is who we're looking for. So all that's getting submitted to the stream, and you may be thinking, well, who can see all that? Well, as a responder, I have all these extra functions. So let's see the release emergency. Only internal responders know about this right now. If I need to, and notice someone submitted some content, must have been from a responder because I haven't released it to anyone else, nor have I released it to the police. But that's how simple it would be if I did want to. And there's another text update. If I go to send update, maybe I need to send an update out to everyone. Stay inside. And that sends out that mass update. Notice via text as well, if you choose to enable that option. I can also see exactly who's checked in. So far it's just me and Andrew. I can see where Andrew is. He's in his remote office. We also have this little A. This is an attendance module, if that's something that may be useful to your organization. And then this little red icon at the bottom, that's for enabling the ability to call responders, this list of responders, or you could have 911. It's really whatever you want to have listed there for people to call in the event of an emergency. But again, the release is simple. I can go ahead and release. Now it's been released. Now it becomes a mass notification, and I can see more people as they start checking into the emergency. Maybe even the category was wrong. It wasn't a fire. It was something else. I can change that. Now see there are new emergency plans that went out. In this case, there are a couple. That was a test. So now we've got our new emergency plans. And when everything is all clear, you simply resolve the emergency. False alarm. And it's gone. It's gone from the phone. And the archives are now on the web console. So depending on time we have available, I'm happy to really dive into the web console and as well as the other modules. So the tips module right there, announcements for your day-to-day announcements, which we can show you from the web later on as well. One thing I do want to show before we move on to the Q&A session is just what it's like to receive an emergency. So if you're wondering that. All right, so let me pull up another device and report an emergency. So you notice that push notification and text message and an audio and a phone call. And that phone call plays a pre-recorded message. It's reading whatever you have it basically set to read. It's a machine reading that message. But you can see, okay, someone's reported the emergency. I can see where they are. Oh, it's Brian Johnson. Oh, that's me. But the red is Brian Johnson, a public network subscriber. And I could communicate and ultimately resolve the emergency. Okay. So if there are any questions on that part of the demonstration, please let me know. If there's anything in particular you're going to want to see more later on, just type it in as a question and we can move over to the web and show some other things later on. But at this point, I would like to get to some more real discussion with Kim. Okay. So Kim, if you don't mind, maybe we could start off, because I think a lot of people have questions about, okay, this all sounds great, but how do I actually implement it? What's it like to really implement it, especially in a large organization where you have many part-time employees, like you said. So maybe if you don't mind, talk a little bit about the challenges you faced and some of the strategies you used that you found successful in implementing PunchAlert.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started by educating our senior staff. We wanted to get them on board first. We knew this was the product we were going to go with. We knew that the pricing was something that we could work with in our association, but we really needed their buy-in into the product. So we started with the senior staff, and it was, once we showed them the features and how we planned to utilize it within the association, they were on board. And then we asked them to identify their key part-time and full-time staff who would act as the branch responders. So we didn't make it a requirement that staff download the app unless they had a YMCA paid phone. So some of our staff do get reimbursed for their phones because of the roles that they play, but most of our staff across the board don't. And so we wanted to make sure that we weren't forcing something on their personal device. So it was just an option. However, they would still have to know about PunchAlert, know how it was going to be utilized in our branches, know that there would be people communicating on the back end, even if they weren't receiving that communication. They would be one of our branch responders. So if you were an opening fitness staff and you were one of the first people in the branches and one of the people who would be running the branches essentially from 5 a.m. until maybe full-time staff got there at 8 a.m., we wanted you to know, even if you didn't have this on your phone, this is our new process. So they were still required to come to a branch responder training because they'd been identified as a key person in the branch. So we worked really closely with PunchAlert, and we set up 10 different trainings for our association over a month-and-a-half time period, and we trained all of our branch responders during that time. At the time, it was about 300 staff that we had identified. That number is now up to 600 because of the use within the branches, but initially our branches identified about 300 staff, and we trained them. So after we got all of those branch responders on board as an organization, which happened, we had all of our initial responders on board by June, then we wanted to make sure that our branches were really comfortable using PunchAlert on the branch responder level before rolling it out to all of our part-time staff. So we allowed staff to conduct what are called test PunchAlerts. So we have test companies set up within each branch, and they can just target who will be practicing in a drill mode. So they can put different responders into a drill mode within PunchAlert, and just those folks would receive the PunchAlert information, and they could practice responding to the emergencies themselves. So we did a lot of practice. That helped. Once our branches were really comfortable in the practice mode and talking to each other on PunchAlert, we then allowed them to opt in and sign up part-time staff on their own. So we made part-time staff, I'm going to call it enrollment because I don't have a better word there, but we allowed part-time staff to roll into PunchAlert, and they did that. Oftentimes it was department specific as opposed to branch specific. So our resident camp wanted to roll on certain part-time staff that hadn't been rolled on in the beginning. So they wouldn't be responders. They wouldn't know all of the emergencies that were going on, but they could report an emergency was happening. So if they were out with their group of campers and had an emergency, they could push the PunchAlert button, notify all of the branch responders at the camp that they needed help. So there were certain branches that adopted this for their part-time staff, but it wasn't a requirement. We allowed the branches to have some autonomy there until January of 2017. So January 1st of 2017, we started educating all of our staff during their annual CPR training about PunchAlert. They get a little one-page document about how to get connected. What PunchAlert is, it's really brief. What PunchAlert is, how we use it as a YMCA, so we give some examples of emergencies and communication that might go out through PunchAlert, and then if they're interested, how to get connected. And so we have set up a YMCA of Greater Charlotte PunchAlert email address. So it's punchalert@ymcacharlotte.org. There's a distribution list of 5 different people that goes to, and they can help get the employee set up. There's also folks at each branch who are designated as a branch administrator, which is just the back end side of PunchAlert, who can add on and delete users. And so we have an association team that can help, or there's a branch team that we can send the employee to get set up. So on January 1st, 2017, we started doing a more extensive part-time staff integration into PunchAlert. And then beginning in April, we are going to pilot rolling out PunchAlert to our members, which is a whole new concept for us. But we have connected PunchAlert with our membership database, which also includes all employees. So it's anyone who is active in our system right now has been uploaded into PunchAlert for communication purposes. And beginning in April, we'll start communicating to our members in one of our large uptown branches about what PunchAlert is. So we'll have banners, and there's marketing material that will go out to members, targeted emails, to let them know that we are using this for emergency communication, but also for communication updates at that branch for a huge renovation that's going on. So the branch is going to remain open during a $23 million renovation that's occurring, which is going to present some challenges and some need for timely communication to members on changes that might happen in the branch. So even if a member doesn't download PunchAlert and get connected that way, we still have uploaded their information into the PunchAlert system, and we can send targeted emails and phone calls if we would choose, and text messages to that individual. They'll look as though they came from the YMCA of Greater Charlotte, or say YMCA of Greater Charlotte, but we'll be able to send them a text message that says, just so you know, today begins the renovation on XYZ, or maybe we would probably do it before today. We'd probably do it next week, begins the renovation on the 3rd floor functional fitness area. This area will be unavailable beginning May 1st and lasting through May 25th. We'll send you updates as we go. So we'll still be able to communicate those out, even if it's not an emergency that we're communicating out to those members, and they haven't adopted it as an application on their phone. They'll still be able to receive information that we feel is necessary to send to them as members of the Y. So we're still rolling out. We haven't completely rolled out. We've gotten our full-time and our key part-time branch responders in place. We've adopted many part-time users, but we've still got some work to do.
Terrific. Well, thanks so much, Kim. That's a great perspective. And I loved when we first got started how, in the pilot phase, you did it at a location that obviously it was one of your most active, I guess you could say, locations, and you just really got a good handle. That team was just so open-minded and so, forward-thinking about solving that problem that I think you just kind of positioned it really well for success. So that's to your credit. Okay, great. So, and thanks for those that are sending in questions. We have a few. We've got about 3 submitted so far. So we're going to wrap up my questions. I've got a couple more, and then and hopefully we'll get a lot more from you all. The second question is just on impact. If you could talk about, how has PunchAlert actually impacted your emergency management processes, and then how has your team actually reacted to this new process? And at any point along the way, Kim, if you want me to show anything in our platform, just let me know.
Okay, perfect. So we were able to, we've had a couple great impacts. One is that we were able to integrate PunchAlert with our phone system in our branches. So our phone systems are actually connected to PunchAlert in that if we dial 911 in one of our branches from any of our branch connected phones, so it doesn't work from a cell phone. If I dial 911 from my cell phone in a branch, this does not happen. But if it's one of our phones connected to our branch, then a PunchAlert will notify all branch responders from that location. So it is branch specific. If I call 911 from my uptown branch, one of our southern branches doesn't get that. So just that branch gets the notification that 911 has been called. In 2016, we actually had 3,100 incidents in our branch, and Many of those, not all of them, of course, but a little under 1,000 required a call to 911. And so this became an incredibly fast way for branch staff who are firsthand in the branches to be able to connect with association leaders who can provide emergency assistance and be connected as soon as 911 is called. So there are a few folks from the association office team who lead branches through emergencies, and one of them is the association risk manager. But then we also have our VP of PR and communications on the emergency response distribution list for every emergency, regardless of the branch. We also have someone from IT. We also have another risk and safety person, and we also have our association director of youth programs, because a lot of what we see and our biggest area of risk includes children. So all of us are available to watch as the emergency is occurring and help where we might be able to provide assistance. That's not every emergency that I can provide anything. You know, the branches do a great job. They're on site. They can't give me a play-by-play every second. But if I see that the emergency is something involving a power outage or an act of violence or an aquatic incident that's significant, it might be imperative for me to just get in my car and drive over to the branch. And so having that information firsthand has really increased our ability to assist the first responders, our part-time staff who are in the branches every day, in a much faster way, and they feel more supported from the beginning. So I think that's the biggest. Oh, and the other major impact is those emergency management plans that you shared earlier, that if our branch identify that the emergency is a missing child, then they have the missing child procedures in their hands. And all of us, anyone who's a branch responder, we're all following the same plan right along, step by step. So that's been huge.
Yep, that's great. Thank you. All right, very good. Well, and then I think the thing that might really kind of tell the story, if you don't mind, is if you could tell us some of the actual stories, some real examples of things that have happened that you'd like to share, and how it's been used, how PunchAlert's been used, either well or poorly or either way, and then the results from those incidents.
Yeah. So we had a tornado come through Charlotte about 2 months ago now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
I remember.
Yeah, it feels like yesterday, but about 2 months ago. And we were watching the weather reports as it was coming in, but not all of our branch staff who were at the branches were aware that these weather reports were coming in, and this strong line of storms with very possible tornado damage was coming through. And tornadoes, although they're a risk in Charlotte, they're not that prevalent. And so we were able to send out a punch alert to all of our branches that across Charlotte, because all of us were in a tornado warning and we were in that zone. We actually had that tornado hit one of our branches. It came through right by one of our resident camps, but didn't affect the resident camps, but it did affect one of our branches, and we were able to get everyone safe and into their prospective tornado cover locations in a timely manner. And you would think, well, didn't everyone know it was coming through? They didn't. And so those punch alerts were really helpful. And we had, questions coming in from across multiple counties about what mode they needed to be in, because the city's huge. And so it may be hitting one part of the county, but it's still an hour away from hitting another. And so those branches wanted to know if they needed to be taking cover at that time. What do they need to do? And so we were able to help them make those decisions as they went. So the tornado, we've had multiple power outages that it's been incredibly helpful because not everyone's at the branch during the power outage. Not everyone's experienced a power outage. So if the power outage is at 9 p.m. and they need to know, how do I override the security system on the doors so I can lock them without setting the security alarm? How do I tell members in the morning? How do I notify staff in the morning? There were a lot of communication points as opposed to action. It was preventative planning for the next day as we came in. We had a small fire that was set at one of our branches, and we were able to quickly work with police. So the other thing that I should have probably touched on a moment ago, but the other thing we were able to do with PunchAlert is get our local police on board with PunchAlert. So Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department is also on PunchAlert now, and we are able to release emergencies to them, meaning if there's something that the police need to know about going on, we can release the emergency and tell them that this major thing has happened at our branch and we need support, and they can follow along with the emergency as well. We've used that a couple of times, but the fire set in the branch was one that was helpful for them to know early on. Our lockdowns in our buildings, so we have a number of different reasons that we might go on lockdown. That might be missing child or a civil disturbance. We had those in Charlotte. For those of you who may not be aware, we've had some civil disturbances going on in Charlotte that have shut down parts of the city, and we've been able to use PunchAlert to communicate through that. So the lockdowns in particular, there's so many pieces of communication at so many different levels that's been really beneficial. Bus accidents, because the PunchAlert can show exactly where the bus is, and it'll map directions to the bus. So for bus accidents, it's really beneficial. Off-site emergencies of our branch teams go off-site, whether that be active older adults taking trips to shopping malls or kids taking trips to parks. The off-site feature is helpful for us because it shows exactly where the emergency is. And then major medical emergencies. We found that it's not all that helpful for us because we have plans in place for minor medical emergencies for communication. So if someone sprains their ankle, for us that's pretty minor. We get a lot of ankle sprains during basketball and soccer and different sports happening. But if someone has a major medical emergency where they're going unconscious or the branch staff needs support in assisting the individual to make sure that they're following all the right procedures. So a head, neck, and back injury, significant bleeding emergency, those kind of things. Those are helpful for us. But we tell staff, regardless of all the emergencies that I've just shared, our communication from the beginning has been that PunchAlert does not supersede any communication tool that you already have in your branch. So we have emergency red buttons that are pushed in our branch if a staff needs help in a certain area, and that notifies the front desk or different areas that the staff needs assistance. Those are still pushed. We still have walkie-talkies in our branches. We still have PA systems in some of our branches. Those systems can still be in place. PunchAlert is just an additional tool that can be used during emergencies.
Yeah, that's a really helpful point, Kim, because I think a lot of people do think about overlap in general, like, oh, we have this or we have that, and that's kind of overlapping. And then even just the the way you described using it for so many different emergencies. I mean, in our view, I think you guys have created a best practice because we do have a wide-ranging kind of set of uses across our customer base where some customers really just think about PunchAlert for emergencies, like real serious life-threatening. It's like active shooter, fire, like that's pretty much it. Like that's why we're buying this product and that's what we want to be prepared for. And I think some people just have a general fear of, oh, I don't want it to get overused. But on the other hand, the way you guys have used it, you're so well practiced in it. So maybe you don't mind just sharing, like, how did you come up with the decision to use it for so many different things? Was it because you wanted to get more practice in it, or did you just see, what was your kind of thinking that got you to that point?
For us, it actually came about in the pilot. So we started with that same train of thought that we'll use it for these major emergencies. And the branch we were using it at our Uptown YMCA is 7 floors. And so they already had a walkie-talkie system because they already had a need to communicate through, different channels. And so we were thinking, we'll just use it for these major emergencies. So we knew we had the highest number of emergencies at that branch, So we thought there'd be some ability to utilize it in addition to the walkie-talkies. Well, that branch decided, let's just see what happens if we just use PunchAlert all the time. And so they started utilizing it for all different things. And it turned out that the need we have a lot of what would be communication emergencies to support our staff. And so during the pilot, we just realized that we thought we were using it for these targeted issues that our staff needed support, but our staff actually needed support for all these things. We just didn't do that before. It was just something we didn't even realize that we were missing. It was just a gap, and staff got along, and it was fine. But adding in that supplemental communication was a huge need for them, and it's been great. So we just continued that. And we do allow the branches to choose when they want to use it. But ultimately, the branches, once they get good at and comfortable with communicating back and forth through the app, they all jump on the same thing, and they use it much more frequently than we anticipated when we adopted it. Yep,
understood. Great. Well, at this point, we have a few questions that have come in, and I'd like to kind of open it up to the audience. And so we have a few. There's 3 I see here. I also, someone's texted me, I believe they're in the car, so they tracked down my phone number and texted in the question. So maybe I'll start with their question if they're on the call. And as for everyone else, those of you that have texted in questions, I'm happy to unmute you if you'd like to kind of talk and explain. But this first question that got texted into me was for Kim. And Kim, if you, and maybe just talk a little bit about whether it was you personally or other folks at the YMCA of Charlotte, what was your kind of thinking around the budget justification for implementing PunchAlert?
So it was not me, although I could jump up and down all day long. I don't actually have a budget. So it was myself, at the time, I think he was still the operational vice president for our uptown branches. He now has that gentleman now has a new role, but I think at the time that was still his role. Our VP of communications and our VP of IT. So we all had identified this as a problem in our own areas. Our operational vice president for our uptown branches had identified it because of the emergencies and issues that were coming in uptown, and just the general threat of being in a downtown location when we've got some civil disturbances that are just going on around us, just with the political environment. And so all of us had identified the need. I had the study that we had done through the U.S. Department of Homeland Security that had identified the need as a critical need for our branches because of the lack that we had of emergency communication methods. So all of that, and our branch was saying, our staff are scared. Our staff need to know how to communicate during an emergency. How do they tell someone if there is an active assailant in our branch? What do we do? And so all of that put some pressure on our senior leaders to say, yep, we recognize this as a major emergency. We're going to find the funds. We're going to do it. We're just going to take the leap. And that's really how it all came about. It was just a culmination of voices all coming together, saying the same thing. And all of us, so the 4 key leaders for our association, the ones that I mentioned, including myself, coming together, we recognized the need together, and combining our message, make it stronger.
Yeah. Well, that's a real, I think that's a sign, that you guys were really, I think when any organization kind of moves forward with something that's not necessarily a checkbox, like, there are these kind of basic things that, kind of table stakes that most people do when it comes to safety, and those are great. You need to do those. But to move forward with something beyond anything that's on that initial checklist and actually, just really think about what are the problems you want to solve and move forward with that and find the budget and, do what you need to do. I think that was really, you guys being pretty innovative as well and forward thinking. So that was a good question. And okay, so we have a couple other questions here. We'll start with, let's see if I can get my mouse. Okay, so this first one's from Gary Autry. And Gary, if you'd like to, I can read your question, or if you'd like, I'll unmute you as well, which I think you are. So your question was, can PunchAlerts be sent from within the geofencing areas? Can PunchAlerts tag areas outside of the geofence area? Gary, are you unmuted? Can we hear you? Okay. Well, I'm not sure if that's if you're unmuted or not, but that was your question. I'm happy to answer it. So yes, absolutely. So first off, the geofencing area is not used for the distribution of the alerts so much. In other words, if Kim is on vacation, in Africa, she's still going to get all the alerts that are happening at the Y, whether she wants to or not. Now whether her location will be shared, no, it will not be shared with anyone because she's not inside any of those geofenced areas. Now, however, if she went to go hit the red button in Africa, that would not report to the Y because she's not inside that protected area. However, because she's a member of the private network, an internal user at the Y, she could override it, so she could actually report an emergency from off property. But to your other part of your question, can you tag areas outside of geofence? And maybe Kim, you can answer this part. I mean, what has been your experience with the geofencing, and how have you kind of used that, or have you created any like temporary geofences or geofences that are not on your properties, anything like that? And while you answer that question, I'll show people the interface on the web.
Yeah. So actually, just yesterday, I had to declare an emergency, and I was outside of the geofence. And so then I was able to log in, and I could move the pin to the area that it was. So I was declaring the emergency that I knew was going on at one of our branches. So I received a phone call. They told me what was going on. It wasn't a 911 emergency. They felt like they just needed some assistance. And so I could declare the emergency from outside the geofence, and then I could move it to the branch. So I'm the one pushing the button. So it shows a location that is not the branch. So I can move that pin to where it is. We've had emergencies outside geofences, like bus accidents, where a geofence isn't set up. We would have an emergency there. We had an emergency at a park that we were visiting. There wasn't a geofence set up there. So it does show the location that they're at. It just won't show if other individuals in that area would open up their app to show where they're standing. I don't know if that makes sense if someone hasn't been with PunchAlert long enough to see these demos, but we can declare it, and we have used that. We have set up geofences for places outside of our property. If we're going to, let's say, some of our swim teams and our gymnastics teams will go on trips to other locations, other YMCAs in other states or other counties. We can set up geofences around the locations that they're going to protect them while they're gone.
Terrific. Well, thanks, Kim. That's
helpful.
To
Carowinds. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Carowinds. Yeah, that's a good example. Yeah, so it's pretty easy to create them or deactivate them, time them, as you can kind of see here in the web console. Gary, if that answered your question, great. If not, feel free to chime in. I think you're still unmuted. And then we'll move on to the next question. So from Lane Wahlberg here. So first question, as the opener in wellness as an example, if they didn't have the app, how are they able to report and see next steps to address an emergency? Well, I guess we can both answer that to a certain extent. As far as not having the app, there are a few features available. So Kim mentioned the 911 integration, so that if you picked up a ShoreTel phone or any phone that's connected to our system and dialed 911 or another extension, you could report an emergency that way. There are physical button tie-ins that we offer. Plus, you can actually text in an emergency. This is a new feature. but you can actually text in the word help to one of our PunchAlert designated numbers. And if you're an employee or associated with that organization in some way, you'll have the ability to report an emergency by a text message. But obviously the best functionality you're going to get, and there are emails, there's text, there's phone calls, there's all these other channels we're using. But the mobile app and the web console, those are really kind of your best tools that you want to get people to use. So yes, you can report, but Kim, maybe you can answer kind of the next step of that is, how have you handled people that either don't have a smartphone or just don't want to download the app? How have they been involved in kind of the whole process, if at all?
Yeah, the 911 integration has been incredibly helpful. So if we know that there's an emergency going on, we don't hear anything through the app. No one updates the emergency with information. Then one of our executive directors, operations directors, will call in. So one great thing about PunchAlert, on the app, I can see who has seen the emergency. So I know if an executive director is seeing the emergency, and if the executive director sees it, they will be the one who calls in to find out what's going on. Otherwise, I'll make that call or ask someone who is on who has seen the emergency to make the call and see if everything's okay. We also have many of our branches, not all of them, but many of our branches have tablets at the sales and service area. The tablets are actually used for customer service purposes, but we have PunchAlert downloaded to all of them as well, so that the sales and service team can communicate. Even if there's not a team member who has the app downloaded to their phone, they do have it downloaded at the branch and can communicate that way as well.
Yep, great. Yeah, that's a good point. The whole front desk, I think the way you've done that is great, to just have some kind of roving or front desk focused devices, because we're constantly hearing, well, this is a use case where people don't have their phones. Maybe like teachers in the classroom don't always, or they have their smartphones, but they might be silenced, or they may not be encouraged to have them, on at all times. So in those examples, it's good to have other things in mind. So we do have a desktop client for Mac and PC. Sometimes it makes sense to have like that iPad station, kind of like you've done at the front desk. So yeah, it's important to get creative with that. Kim, this is another question, and I think you can take it. So, can you speak to the training provided from PunchAlert to the customer? I can share certainly our default, but maybe from your perspective, how has the training process been? And then also resources that might be available to assist in staff education or emergency action plans.
So the training with PunchAlert was fabulous. Carol oversaw our training from your team, and she was wonderful. So really, we tailored it to what our YMCA needed. I know that you guys have defaults, and then we kind of took those and made them YMCA specific. She came in and did many trainings for us to the point that I was really feeling terrible. And so we found a way to adopt it and roll it into our own training system, just so that we weren't taking too many resources away from PunchAlert. I know no one from PunchAlert ever said a word, but I sure did feel bad. So there was that. We also, you guys have the videos on YouTube, and so our branch responders watch the YouTube videos, and our branch staff, we shared the YouTube video link with them. The staff video is very short. I think it's like under 3 minutes long. And that's a great tool for them, because trying to nail down all of our part-time staff to watch something lengthy that would be like a huge training for them is difficult. But that quick video is great, along with the little one-page sheet and the directions that come if they sign up to have the app, was all they really needed. It was the branch responder training that got us on board. And then even the one-page sheet, the PunchAlert team designed for us, and we were just able to simply roll that out based on the creation that Carol made for us.
Yep. Well, that's great. Well, that's really, what we aim for. We want, the training process is generally, as Kim described, we want to make sure the administrative team and the responder team, and Carol Tobias on our team does run that process, and it's very organized, and it allows you to really make sure top down that you really have a good handle on the administrative control of our platform, and that's, maybe you saw a little bit of that while I was doing a demo. But this is your admin, and from, if I go back to the home, you can see there's this emergency module, announcements module to send announcements, tips, admin settings, and some other items. But if I drill into the admin, if you're an administrator, you can control all your users' information by uploading, whether it's happening through an integration source or you've manually uploaded CSV or one at a time, or again, a few different strategies for onboarding. But for every user, for like my user account, you can see my information and encourage people to upload photos. Actually, Kim, is that something you think is done pretty well across your organization? Have people uploaded photos into their app?
I'm going to go with maybe about 50%.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Very good. So,
it's very
have you found that to be helpful? Is it helpful, would you say, that they upload their photo?
It's hard for me to say because I know so many of the individuals who are on it, and so I know their faces.
Right.
But I believe if you ask someone other than me who didn't necessarily know who they were talking to, I think they would say that it's helpful.
Right. That makes sense. Great. So this is, so that's one of many things that Carol kind of trains into this admin. And again, the admin, you really just need, maybe it's one person, maybe it's a handful of people that are administrators. It's certainly not a lot that have all this control over, what's your messaging, what are your default things, do you want text messages going out, do you want voice phone calls going out, what are some of the integrations, what are some of the predefined messages, your categories. All these things are configurable, and then we make sure to provide quite a bit of training on that. If you can get past that first stage, I think that's pretty key. The next is the responder training, which Carol did on site since we're local here in Charlotte. We generally do that over the phone. I mean, we do these webinars, go to meetings, and can train your responder teams. And usually that's about an hour. And if you want more information on that, I'd really encourage you to reach out to us and talk to Carol about that process. I do see another question here. Are there any downsides to the program that you can share with the group? I think that's a great question. So, Kim, if you don't mind taking that.
So one thing, I'm going to call it I don't know that it's a downside, it's just a challenge that we have, is that it does require that someone have their mobile phone. And at YMCAs, and I know, Greg, you mentioned this earlier, that a teacher's phone would be on silent. But for a long time, it was encouraged that staff not have their phones, period. So you can imagine that for lifeguards. Of course, a lifeguard doesn't have their phone, but camp counselors and fitness staff, the encouragement was that staff not have their phone with them while they're working. The reason for that was that there was little trust that staff could stay off of their phones. They just can't use their phones. And while I understand that as an operator, because I came from the operations side of YMCAs, I, as a risk manager, would have a hard time if there were a major emergency saying, well, we didn't allow the camp counselors to have their phones because we couldn't trust them to stay off their phones. Because what I am trusting them with is far greater than the trust that they can stay off their phones. I'm trusting them with the lives of children every single day. I can't say that I couldn't trust that 18-year-old counselor to stay off their phone. So how instead do we train staff on the importance of staying off their phone while they're working and still allowing them to have it for emergency purposes? So instead it's just a shift in the way that we think about technology in 2017. A lot of those thoughts came from 2000, when cell phones were just coming out and they weren't such an integral tool and really a baseline in emergency communication. Now if we are not allowing staff to have their phones during an emergency, we are taking away much of what they're used to as an emergency communication tool. And so that challenge was tough. And then as well, the challenge of when people go on vacation, helping them get deconnected from PunchAlert. There is the ability to take them out of, put them in a, I forget what the word is, but essentially you suspend their messaging going out while they're on vacation. And that's easy to do. It's just a click of a button, but it's just educating and working with staff on when they are out, whether that be maternity leave or vacation, getting that shut off for them.
Yeah, that's interesting, and that's a great point. I think it's just such an important point about smartphones in general. I mean, I think, or technology in general. Like when when it evolves, you do have to worry about, there are always some advantages, and obviously that's why we're here. We're here to talk about the advantages and the problems we can help you solve with the technology. Though, yeah, I mean, smartphones can be a distraction as well, of course. But managing that, rather than just saying, oh, no, let's not leverage this technology because of the potential challenges. I think the way, Kim, you guys have kind of tackled that head on, and I think that's just kind of the way any new technology is, and it's so important to get past that point, I think, to get to the benefits. And so it's a great question and a great talking point in general, something certainly for everyone to think about. We're at 11:30. I do see a couple questions chime in, so maybe we'll address one more, and then we'll wrap it up. This one is, how does this apply to aquatics emergencies? Some Ys are in guard pools. Okay, I think Kim just mentioned that. So I think we are good for today. I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today. Of course, if you want more information, please reach out, and we're happy to arrange one-on-one discussions with anyone that wants to do that and dive in more into the platform. And I really want to thank Kim. Thanks, Kim, for taking the time today. We really appreciate it.
Of course. Happy to share. Thanks for having me.
Great. All right, everyone, we'll have a terrific day, and we will be in touch soon. Take care.